Hello students, today we'll continue our discussion on the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. We're in the third presentation today, and I would like to begin this presentation by discussing with you probably the most famous house of the 20th century and considered to be one of the greatest houses ever built, the Fallingwater. It was a weekend retreat that was made over a waterfall called Bear Run in Pennsylvania, designed by F.L. Wright for the family of the Kaufmans. It's also called the Kaufman House after the name of the family, but it then finally came to be known more popularly as Fallingwater. Now, as you might have heard, that Wright is very much associated with the philosophy or concept called organic architecture. Organic architecture is where we try to make human habitation in harmony with our natural surroundings. The human habitation and the natural world harmonize with one another, and Wright therefore proposed structures that were inseparable from the environment both aesthetically and functionally. The house that you see here in this picture is the Posen House in Arizona in 1940, and the house was made like other houses that he made within the concept of organic architecture. It was made using the local material from this place, the local wood and the local stone, so much so that if you look at the picture, the house just seems to merge with the landscape. And ironically, when this house was demolished, the ruined part of the house looked as if it's a part of the landscape itself. So this theory of organic architecture is where the house or the dwelling or the building becomes completely harmonized with the environment around it. Integration with environment where the buildings blend with the surroundings and do not dominate them. His famous saying where he said the house should be off the hill and not on the hill, using materials, forms and designs that complement the natural landscape. What are the key principles that he followed throughout his lifetime in keeping organic architecture in mind? That form and function are one. Now this is very interesting because for a long time in architecture, form had dominated function, or rather we could say that function was following form. And then came theorists like Violet Duck, and finally Sullivan said form ever follows function, and that dictum became the guiding dictum of all modern architecture in the 20th century. But Wright came and he modified that. He didn't say form follows function, though he had been the disciple of Sullivan. He said form and function work as one. One cannot be delineated from the other. They both are intrinsically connected with one another. And you can easily decipher that when you do a design studio problem. You realize that as you work between function and form of the building, you do not work in a manner that you design the function, for example, the plan of the building, raise up the walls and the elevation is there and the building is done. It's never like that. It's a to and fro process of trying to balance the form and the function. And so you would also start subconsciously realizing that right is right. Form and function are one. Design of the building is from its intended is for its intended purpose. Every element for the functional and aesthetic integrity. Natural materials which are locally sourced and that appear natural, right? Used wood, stone, even bricks and other materials that were connecting the building with the environment. So for example, in the prairie houses, if he was to use bricks, he did not plaster them. He left them in their natural state. He pointed them and very well articulated them, and that is what you find in the prairie houses. And then you can keep on looking at other buildings and you find different materials used as per the available material in that place. The key principles within open and flowing spaces, free flowing interior spaces where there is a lot of openness, it reflects the organic way in which people live and move. Then later on, even in the Usonian houses, these pictures that you see are pictures of the Bachman Wilson house, an Usonian house he built in 1954. What were the Usonian houses? I'll come to that little later. The key principles are a respect for the individual. The architect is to serve the user and not the other way around. Emphasis on comfort, on practicality and individual taste or individuality. There is simplicity and clarity in the building, the design is uncluttered, there are clear lines, and the concept is very straightforward. So, coming back to Fallingwater, there was an exhibition held by the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 1932, where all modernist work by different modernist European architects was displayed, and their right, though having so much ego that my work should be displayed separately from these younger European architects, he was yet compelled to look at their work. And when he saw their work, people say that after that, Wright's own work became as modern as that of Mies van der Rohe and Corbusier. Please understand that these younger European architects had learned from Wright. The D-style architects, for example, had greatly been inspired by Wright. Free-flowing plans and the kind of interiors they developed. For example, I'd given you the example of the Schrader House by G.T. Rittveld. That all came from Wright's concept of architecture and what architecture should be. But the kind of decorative work Wright used to do, the Art Nouveau grill work over the windows, etc., that was completely negated by the younger European architects. So, though they would follow the space planning of Wright and take the ideas from him, but they would remove this clutter from their buildings. And having seen that kind of architecture in 1932, Wright himself turned towards flat, undecorated surfaces and glass without grillwork. There were sweeping planes and large uninterrupted panes of glass in the Fallingwater. It is probably the most poetic statement F.L. Wright ever made. It is a temple dedicated to nature on a rocky ledge on which this house rests. It is amongst the best examples of 20th century architecture with a waterfall that goes below it, and there's a great sweeping cantilevers of the house that you can see here, all made in RCC. They are hanging over the waterfall, and this geometric composition of these horizontal concrete planes is so remarkably simple by his standards. So through the forest you can look out above the stream, the house is standing, and Wright planned this view to be the view of the house. This is from where this shot is taken. He considered this to be the central view of the Fallingwater. So if you compare the development of Wright's architecture from the Roby house in 1906 to 1910 to Fallingwater in 1936, what do you find? What do you find? The spaces continue to remain free-flowing and open, but they become even more free-flowing and open. He does use the materials available locally in that region, and we find a different set of materials used in Fallingwater. So if he uses brick in Roby house, which is readily available there, he uses stone from site in the Fallingwater. He uses a lot of concrete and cantilevered terraces, and the difference is he uses cantilevered roof in the Roby house. These are cantilevered roofs. I told you earlier, there are these steel beams that are over which these roofs are hanging, and they are cantilevered. So these are cantilevered roofscape, and now those cantilevered roofs are converted to workable roofs. Rather, you should call them cantilevered terraces. They are now roofs that are usable as terraces in the Fallingwater. And just as there is a juxtaposition of various roofscapes, cantilevered roofscapes in Roby house, there is a similar juxtaposition of cantilevered terraces in the Fallingwater. Not only that, see how this boulder which is on site is allowed to penetrate the floor of the living room and to be a part of the fireside. And there is fire at the center of the house. This continued to remain Wright's underwritten principle that the fireplace is always at the center of the house. Now, if you want to compare the plans of how Wright evolved as an architect, you take the example of the Winslow house, and you find his attempt at that time was to break the box, but he was not able to do it. He tried to stretch it and pull it in different directions, though he was able to get a certain amount of free movement, but still there was a lot of restriction. Then he moved over to the Ward Willett's house, where he provided a cross plan, and thus there was this kind of flowing movement around the fireplace. Then he went for a linear plan in the, this is not Fallingwater, this is the Roby house. There was the linear plan here, and the space flowed like this in the linear plan with the cantilevered roofs over it in the Roby house. And then finally in the Fallingwater, the entire ground floor space, which is the living room, became one single open space, wide expanse with all glass looking out towards the natural landscape, and inside seems to merge with the outside. This is all boxiness, even the corners are in glass, and that boxiness is completely dissolved. All interior spaces extend across broad balconies or terraces into the landscape in Fallingwater. So this is the site plan. This is the main house that you see here. This is the Bear Run. There's a waterfall underneath the house, and as you climb from the house, you reach the guest house which is behind the house. You can see it here in the picture. This is the Fallingwater main house, and there's the guest house at a slightly higher altitude. Again, here you find this is the main house, and this is the guest house at the back. So here you see in this slide, this is the entry and the main level. You enter the house from a side, and the entry, we made it very narrow, very small. That was the way he used to do it, so that you enter in this very dark and dingy space, and suddenly as you go in, it opens up to a very wide and open space. And he repeatedly tried this idea. So here you enter into this vast main room, having the dining area, the living area, opening out towards the terraces, and even going down to the waterfall below. Then you go up the level on the second floor, and you have the master bedroom, the guest room, each having their own terraces, and then you grow to the level above that, and then again you find the studio and the terrace and one bed area. This is the west elevation and the south elevation of the Fallingwater. And structurally also this house proved to be a marvel. I will not mind repeating this over and over again, that Wright was a master structural engineer, and we repeatedly find that in his projects. Now, say for example, below the lowest terrace, this is the lowest terrace, there are these piers which are supporting the building. But these piers are not directly into the waterfall straight down, but they are inclined in this way, so that to a very large degree they do not seem to appear in the pictures. You are not easily able to see them. I will show you the picture. As you can see here, for most cases the piers are not easily visible, and the cantilevered terraces seem to hang or float in the air. So instead of having piers going straight into the stream, he inclined them so that they would recede and yet keep on carrying the load. The terraces are as if open boxes made of concrete, but you don't see any beams under them. Why? Because he used the concept of inverted beam. The beams are embedded in the terrace or in the floor plate itself. So the beams are within the boxes, and the result is that the concrete structure has terraces which have got flat undersides, and over this is laid redwood boards, and on top of that the flagstone is provided. At the outer windows in the living room, there are no corner posts, there are no mullions. The window just turns the corner and there is no vertical post. But there is another issue. In order to provide more structural support, you know what he did? Some of these steel mullions, like this one, like this one, like this one, like this one, which appear to be slightly thicker, are actually structural mullions. They are carrying the load of the building and transferring the load to the inverted beam in the terrace. Inverted beam transfers the load to the pier, and the pier transfers the load into the rocky terrain beneath. This is the exterior view. This is the entrance to the house. This is an amazing kind of a covering provided or overhang provided in a curved form that takes you from the house to the guest house above. And this is the guest house above with the pool here. This is the side steps coming from the main living area down to the waterfall below. This is the pergola'd entrance at the back where you drive in. This is the entrance, the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, another part of the living room, and the main living room picture. You can see how wonderfully you The outside and the inside seem to become one with each other. It is as if you are in a cave, fully secured, but you have this fantastic view looking out. Now, with all these buildings that he was doing, and before that, Wright had started thinking of the movement of space not just horizontally but also in the vertical direction. I talked about it earlier when I was talking about the Unity Temple, maybe even in the Larkin building, that he came up with the idea of plasticity and continuity. Around Larkin and the Unity Temple, FLW thought of the possibilities of space in motion up and down and sideways. Earlier, the space was a horizontal moving entity. It was controlled by layers which are parallel to the earth. So you have a building, it has got many floors in it. It can have open, free flowing space, but you're moving only in the horizontal direction. But with the Larkin building and the Unity Temple, he was able to provide in the Unity Temple, for example, these cantilevered balconies, and in the Larkin building, these office spaces, galleries on either side of the atrium. And thus, what you have, people standing here or sitting here can look into the hall below. And thus, there is this connection between them. And the space seems to change levels from not only moving or flowing in the horizontal direction, but also in the vertical direction. Rather, we should say space and light are now moving in all directions. That brings in the concept of plasticity and continuity in his building. Light not only in horizontal bands, but light is also coming in from the skylights above. So he's capturing the light from the atrium skylight of Larkin building and from the skylight of the Unity Temple. Movement is not only horizontal, but it is also vertical. So this whole idea of integrating structure with skin was something that really fascinated him. How can it be that we have plastic concrete just as a seashell, making that concrete both the structure and the enclosing skin? This particular project is a futuristic project which was Osterius had envisioned it in 1999 to 2001 called Transports. And this building was supposed to have this enclosing skin as the structure of the building also. So no more columns needed. The enclosing skin is also the structure. What if we could have glass that was actually the structural system of the building? So though you're enclosing the building with this curtain wall glass, but you don't need any more columns because the glass itself is carrying the weight of the building. Could there come a time like that? And Wright envisioned and dreamed of this. So Wright's philosophy of organic architecture was building an integrated whole where the structure and enclosing skin are inseparable to each other. And he tried or somewhat attempted that in the Guggenheim Museum in New York in 1959. One of his last projects, I believe it was completed after he passed away. Now, with plastic properties of RCC, because you know that RCC is moldable, Wright was able to create these organic forms in harmony with the surroundings. His emphasis on continuity ensured that buildings offered a seamless, cohesive experience, integrating interiors and exteriors, unifying the aesthetic and the functional elements. So when you look at Wright's building, there is one aesthetic on the outside and the same aesthetic on the inside. The outer part of the building is very reflective or indicative of what you were going to find on the inside of the building. There was a lot of harmony between that. These principles were all evident in the Unity Temple, Fallingwater, Guggenheim Museum, all these buildings. And then the Posen House, example of an organic architecture merging with the surrounding landscape. This was an evolution of the earlier prairie style. Now please understand this about all great architects, that what they develop in their earlier years or they find as the basic fundamental principles that seem to work, that seem to find the right solution for them, they continue to adhere to them and continue to evolve them in times to come in other buildings and in other contexts. So in the Posen House also, the original idea of the prairie house or the concept continued. This is the sketch, and this is what I was talking about, the ruin of the Posen House. When the house is ruined, actually seems to just be a part of the landscape of that region, because the material is taken from the site or from that area itself. Then Wright came up with the idea of the Usonian houses. There's a whole set of houses that I've not talked about with you. I hope I get an opportunity to bring them to you. They are called the ready cut system. Way back in the 1910, 1915, Wright was always fascinated with the idea of providing housing for the economically weaker section. People who could not afford a house like a Roby house or a house like a Winslow house. People who could afford simpler houses. And he came up with this whole idea of the American ready cut system where the houses could be ready cut and then brought on site, assembled together. As a whole context in that, and maybe we'll come to that some other time. But let's come to a similar idea that he employed somewhere in the 1930s, late 1930s, 40s, and that was the idea of Usonian houses. The word Usonian was a term used by William Butler in his utopian novel called Erewhon, and it is a low-cost prototype called the Usonian home. It is an important contribution to modern living housing, and Wright made several of these Usonian houses in America. It was based on a kit of parts where there is a concrete slab foundation floated on drained bed of cinders and sand. So this is a standard format followed in order to cut down on cost. Into this slab, which forms the foundation of the house, radiating hot water is inserted to keep the house warm. And the roof is very simple insulated slab containing a ventilation system. It is made to overhang the edges of the dwelling so as to throw rainwater clear of the house and also to create a sense of shelter and to protect the house from glare and provide a horizontal plane that would relate to the earth plane. And so we have the example of the Rosenbaum house. Now the interesting part, and this is the Zimmermann house, the interesting part, and we'll come to that later, how he encloses the house towards the front and opens it up towards the back. We'll come to that. Now the concept is the existing social environment led to the acceptance of such houses. World War II was over, the Americans were coming back from war, the country had changed dramatically in its thought process. They were wanting such kind of simpler houses that people could afford. There was a free plan interior with exterior sit out spaces or patios, and a vision of a middle class suburban life is what the Usonian houses represented. Now basically the Usonian houses were also built on the concept of the prairie house, and we'll come to that. What it used to have is that first of all the formal living room was abolished. There is no such thing as a formal living room. It's just a room which is meant for the family as an informal gathering space, and the kitchen and living area are blended together. Do you catch this point? Do you get it in today's modern apartments? In the apartments we live in our cities today in India or abroad, this kind of blending is taking place. The living space, the lounge and the kitchen all blend together as one because we have open kitchen plans today. The houses were judiciously proportioned and detailed. The standard plan varied to blend to unique sites. So there is a standard plan, but it did not that you just superimpose the standard plan on each site. Each site has its varying requirements and the house varied accordingly. The same was true for the American ready cut system. In the Usonian houses, it was a modernized version of the prairie house concept. It had more simplicity, in both simplicity and plan. Servants were vanishing, so need for a servant space or a servant room was not needed. A carport was definitely needed because cars were coming in, so a kind of a car parking space was needed. The floor slab was integrated with radiant heating to heat up the house. There was built-in furniture again to cut down on cost, and the kitchen was open plan. There was a utility core. The entire plan was a modular plan. There was a pinwheel growth because Wright again continued to insist the fireplace is the center of the house and the house revolves around it, and it had a two-level roof. As you can see here, it has a two-level roof. All functions are simplified, modernized and made more economical for the sake of economical construction. The plan had extensive glass doors leading to the exterior courtyard, and as you can see on this glass there is no Art Nouveau grille work. from the interior rooms, including the bedrooms and dens, you could get this view of the exterior spaces. And the first wing, for example, in this house, the Rosenbaum house, contained the family and the group rooms. I would request you to kindly enlarge this plan on your laptop or tablet or phone, and then look at it that this is the living space here. You enter the house from here, and this is another wing which is having the bedrooms, and there is another space here which contains the other parts of the house. The second wing, again let's come back, this is the second wing that contains the bedrooms and the private spaces, and the bathroom, kitchen and utility spaces are at the intersection of the two wings. Now there is a similarity in the Usonian house plans with that of the prairie houses. Let's take the similarity. This is the Goetsch-Winkler house, the Rosenbaum house, the Jacobs house and the Zimmermann house. All of them have a certain similar format. For example, the way the living space, the dining space, the alcove are all connected as one, and so also here. So there is variations based on the site, etc., but they all are following a similar model, and they are also linked up with the prairie house. This is from where we learn from the prairie house. You see here the Roby house. The Roby house is a living space, a dining space, a fireplace in the center, and then the guest in the kitchen, etc. here. So here what you find in the Zimmermann house, you have the living space here, and you have the fireplace, and you have the other spaces on the back of it, and the dining area is here. Or for example, if you take the Port Willets house, which is a cross plan, and the Rosenbaum house here is like more or less like a cross plan. So he is learning from the prairie houses and bringing those ideas into the Usonian houses. All that he is doing is he's simplifying that. All the clutter that somewhat existed in the prairie houses is all gone. The Usonian house becomes more simple, more modular, the space is more free flowing, the glass is without Art Nouveau ornamentation, grill work, and there is more openness in the house. The house seems to be more informal and truly for a people who could afford less to build a house. The Usonian interiors had furniture designed by Wright as in other buildings, very simple and intended to be made on site by the carpenter. It reflected the core principles of simplicity, functionality and organic integration in the architecture. Organic integration in the sense that the house, the furniture and everything else all will work together in harmony as one. And that is what Wright used to do. Design is to feel like an extension, the furniture is designed to feel like an extension of the architecture rather than separate pieces of furniture that have been embedded into a space. It won't happen. All the furniture is in tune with the house in which it has been kept. So each house will have that distinct furniture language which will merge with the language of the house, the architectural language of the house. So the built-in furniture is there. One of the very fantastic ideas of Wright, and he continued to use this idea. You will find built-in furniture even in Tellison that he made in Arizona. So there is a built-in furniture. This sofa and seating, desks and shelving are directly embedded into the architecture, into the building. Space is saved, space is streamlined, and space becomes uncluttered. There is a geometric simplicity of clean lines and geometric forms, and again it echoes the modular way in which Usonian homes have been planned. Natural materials have been used, like primarily wood, tied furniture. He connected the furniture with the organic philosophy of the house, and he left it unstained and lightly finished. And then the next concept is the modular and reproducible design, ease of construction and reproduction. The Usonian concept was supposed to be an affordable design. The furniture, for example, was flat panels assembled in a straightforward planar fashion and very low profile and human scale, with the overall effect of a simple environment. Architecture, furniture and nature are all seamlessly connected with one another. And then within the Usonian house there is an experiment done by him, and the experiment, which he did with many other buildings, is he changed the grid of the building. And here he thought of experimenting with a polygonal grid, in this case a hexagon. Now this is one thing that I encounter in the design studio many times. The students want to work with a polygonal floor plan, and this is what I tell them. I always direct them to F.L. Wright, and I always tell them, if you want to do it, then you have to go all the way. If you want to start with a hexagon as a floor plate, then you have to use it repeatedly all the way. You cannot do half measures. You cannot take one or two hexagonal plates and then change the plate format of the house in the other parts. You can't do that, because then it just will not work. In Wright's case, it simply worked. If it worked, I'm nobody to pass a very firm judgment, but based on what I see, in the Paul and John Hanna house he did on the Stanford campus, he made this with the hexagonal grid, and hexagonal grid has its problems because the hexagon has a way of spreading in a certain manner, but how amazingly he did that. He put the hexagonal grid, and then the walls accordingly were placed, and the house was the same idea of open floor planning and floor spaces, everything was done. As you can see, the hexagon appears in the floor also as the design of the floor, and not only that, if you watch carefully, the hexagon appears in the furniture designed by him, even in the cushion. Even in the furniture designed by him, the hexagon appears. His first work with non-rectangular structures in the Usonian house showed that polygonal modules could also provide openness. Hexagonal modules could become a part of the floor plan. Another house, and this I want to compare in a very interesting way with the Barcelona pavilion by Mies van der Rohe, to take you back to that idea I told you. 1932, the exhibition of modern art by Philip Johnson and one more colleague of his. In that exhibition, and through that also came out the book called The International Style. And I told you there that Wright had become modern for a certain time. The Art Nouveau grill work was gone, the glass was plain, the walls were plain. So here we have the Goetsch-Winkler house. The Goetsch-Winkler house continues to have the idea of the cantilever of Wright. It has got wood, brick and glass, and it is so similar to the Barcelona pavilion, which was done in 1929. Very interesting. They say that of all the people who studied under Wright in the two Tillysons, none succeeded. Who succeeded? The ones he threw out of Tillyson, they succeeded. Anon succeeded. The one person who turned out to be one of the most valuable or one of the most close disciples of F.L. Wright and his work was Mies van der Rohe, who never went to Tillyson. But his work has so much of F.L. Wright in it. When I talk of Mies van der Rohe, I'll give you those glimpses. This Barcelona 1929, done by Mies van der Rohe in this exhibition in Spain, was actually derived from the architecture of Wright. Remember, Wright started designing in 1891-92. So he was a generation older to Mies. Mies learned from his architecture this design of free-flowing spaces within the Barcelona pavilion, of the use of this kind of cantilevered roof overhanging the walls, of the walls themselves being planes, and the way the whole thing is organized in a very simple manner was actually borrowing from Wright. What he was not doing was doing all the cluttery work that Wright used to do. He removed all that kitsch and made it simple, but the essential idea was Wright's. Now when Wright made the Goetsch-Winkler house much later, the Goetsch-Winkler house turns out to be a very close interpretation, imitation, copy, whatever you might call it, of the Barcelona pavilion. So what is the story? The disciple learns from the master learns from the disciple, and the cycle goes on. So here Wright has a similar approach to the internationalists. The Usonian houses, the foundation of the Usonian houses is in the international style modernism. It's primarily that, but without a shadow of doubt, it is an international style that has been modified, influenced and transformed by F.L. Wright in his own way, in his own idiom. So let's come back to another Usonian house, the Zimmermann house, where I want to show you this idea of enclosing and opening. When you look at the house on the front, You have these, in keeping with Wright's Usonian philosophy, there is no basement, there is no attic, there is a carport, there is a concrete slab flooring, there is built-in furniture, construction materials are from nature, abundant natural views are there, but he closes the view from the front of the house and gives minimal view. On the back of the house, towards the garden, he completely opens it up. He completely opens it up, as you see again in this picture. Simple square concrete windows are provided on the front, band across the facade, reveal very little about the interiors, but you go toward the rear of the house and the same Zimmermann house becomes completely transparent. This is exactly what Corbusier also did, but not in the same way. Wright is doing on the same level. On the front it's enclosed, on the back it's open, so that where the house needs privacy and open space, he provides it. Garden is not for show to the people going on the road, garden is meant for the private use of the people of the house. What did Corbusier do? Corbusier did it another way. He built these houses in Paris, in France as row housing, and he provided the roof garden, which is at the topmost floor of the house, and there the family sits in privacy and enjoys this view of the surrounding landscape. And there again, the garden is not meant for the common view of the people passing by on the street. It's right on top in a private space for the family. So Corbusier managed the same concept in a slightly more tight condition in the city of Paris. He broke the box, Wright broke the box of the traditional home design, and instead of building rooms, he created open spaces that float together. At Zimmermann house, there are these narrow shelf-lined entry corridors that flow into the main living space. Again, he brings you into the house through a narrow corridor. In the Fallingwater, he brings you into the house through a very narrow door. And in many projects, he does that. Very narrow space, this dark and dingy and suddenly it bursts into a big space and there's a lot of light out there. He does it here also. Brings you into this large space where there are built-in sofas, there's a view of the garden, there's expansive glass there. So here we saw in this presentation how Wright evolved over the years and became stronger and stronger in his architectural language and gave us buildings that are existing today, and so many of those buildings are heritage buildings in America. It is very, very uncommon for heritage buildings to be made heritage buildings in such a short time of an individual being there. He passed away in around 1959. And within a matter of years, or even I think in his lifetime, many of his buildings have become heritage buildings in America. This is where we end today, and I'll continue here to the last presentation of Wright, where I will talk about the principles that governed his house design. Thank you.